This podcast is sponsored by the Wilson Center, but it doesn't have to be. It could be sponsored by your firm. Just imagine it, a crescendo of electronic tango. Some love for your company and the enduring gratitude of our listeners. Interested? Reach out to us at lap@wilsoncenter.org. That's LAP@wilsoncenter.org.
Welcome back to the Argentina Project podcast, brought to you by the Wilson Center. I'm your host, Benjamin Gedan.
And I'm your producer, Katie Hopkins.
Katie, on the podcast today, I'm joined by phone from Buenos Aires by reporter Demian Bio. He's covering Argentina's presidential election for Infobae.
Benjamin and Demian discuss the return of the Peronists and why the election showed off Argentina's maturing democracy.
On to the interview. Hey, Demian, how are you?
Good. How are you?
You seem very excited about Argentine democracy.
Well, at least we're having some democracy. Or
you seem filled with pride, and you seem reassured by the quality of the elections and the transition process so far.
I mean, the bar was quite low, so anything other than maybe one president hinting that she wanted to bash the other one's head with the staff is encouraging.
Well, you mentioned the staff. I mean, last time around, if I recall, Cristina fled the capital. She went to Santa Cruz, wouldn't participate even in the ceremony. I think it was unclear who was president for like 1 hour.
Yes, exactly. We have a president for 12 hours, Federico Pinedo, the best president in Argentine history. No inflation under Pinedo.
That's right. I don't know. Inflation is high enough in Argentina that even hourly, probably the increase in prices is significant.
Well, we need to let him have something. You know, maybe if it was, I mean, he was president between, I think, 8 p.m. and 8 a.m. Yeah. So hopefully supermarkets didn't increase the prices back then.
That's right. But actually, no, look, you had presidential debates. You had a free and fair election with no allegations of fraud, and you have a clear result, and you've had a breakfast, right, this morning between the outgoing and incoming presidents? Yeah. You know, we are now a beacon of democracy in the region. And look, well, you have a non-Peronist finishing his term.
No, exactly. I mean, I am kidding, but I am not kidding that much. All of the things that have happened in the past month, especially considering how bad the economy has been, have been really uncommon and very encouraging, showing that Argentine's democracy has matured a bit, at least.
And look, it's common for those who follow Latin America to ask, why are Argentines not burning down this country? You know, if they're upset in Santiago, how are they not, you know, in the streets in Argentina? It seems like one of the reasons is what you've just described, that there are democratic outlets that are functioning and letting people express themselves in the urnas, no?
Definitely. I would say there are two main reasons. One is the one that you just mentioned, the fact that there were elections coming up, and also that a big part of the opposition sees Peronism as a way to protest against these measures democratically is a big reason why, because if they saw no hope in any party, maybe the social reaction would have been slightly different. And the second one that many people have made reference to is the fact that after what happened in 2001, which was catastrophic, there were some buffers put in place by Kirchner administrations that, you know, helped prevent maybe future social outbursts. And I'm talking about maybe the Asignación Universal por Hijo, the Universal Child Allowance, and other social programs that helped at least get people to not be completely destitute. You know, of course, Argentina has a big part of its population under the poverty line, but these programs help them not to completely fall off the cliff.
You mentioned that the vote for Peronism is a way to protest the austerity measures that have been implemented as part of Argentina's IMF program. This is the famous voto castigo that you hear a lot about. Is that what helps explain why voters have turned to the Peronists, whose, you know, last time in government caused a lot of the problems that, you know, Mauricio Macri inherited and then, you know, failed to solve and even made worse? This is a question that I hear a lot from non-Argentines, which is how could they possibly vote for the same party that created all of these economic imbalances and a vice president who is facing, 10, 11, 12 federal corruption investigations?
Well, also, I think that the answer to that question has a few parts. When it comes to Christina Kirchner in particular, she's such a divisive figure that she will always have a big number of supporters who will support her no matter what and no matter what the allegations against her say. Because as she has stated in the past, she believes that most of them, or all of them actually, are manufactured and are a way to persecute her politically, using the concept of lawfare to define what's been happening to her. And her supporters tend to believe her. So that is one part maybe of the argument when it comes to trying to explain why people voted for the Peronists. Again, despite the economic situations that they left in 2015. And perhaps the other reason, as you said, was the voto castigo. Many elections when become a referendum on the incumbent. And even though the herencia, the inheritance was very bad, and there is consensus on that, I think the fact that they were able to shift the blame on the economic mismanagement that the Macri administration went through and during the administration also helped them turn the spotlight from the herencia to what happened in the past 4 years.
If this was a referendum on Mauricio Macri and his, neoliberal reforms, his market liberalization, it doesn't seem like the message was all that clear. I mean, he lost, certainly, but he ends up, within a couple percentage points of his competitor. He, gets over 40% of the vote despite absolutely disastrous economic conditions. In your mind, what explains the continued support for Mauricio Macri from such a large segment of the population? Is it, fear of Peronism? Is it diehards who just won't vote for a Peronist no matter what? Is it still a recognition that even 4 years later, many of Argentina's problems aren't Macri's fault? I mean, how do you explain the crowds he generated in the last weeks of the campaign in that, tour of 30 cities in 30 days and his performance yesterday in the election?
Mm-hmm. I think it's a combination of all of the things that you said. The herencia, of course, was extremely present for many people who also don't place the blame entirely on the Macri administration. Then you have a third of the population who is not going to vote for a Peronist, and the government has been able to present itself as the main opposition party. So yes, those are the main factors that I would say helped Macri get 40% of the vote, and also the fact that after the primaries, they, instead of conceding, I think immediately they try to fight for the comeback, helped to gather these massive crowds, and I think it played a big role in it wasn't a comeback per se because Macri did not win, but he did perform much better than in the primaries. And the heavy and the intense campaign that he led during this past week helped gather these big crowds, and also result in an election that is not all too bad for him, as he said, because he got 40% of the vote. And this means that the still government is going to be the largest party in the lower house in the next 2 years, at least.
And, before we conclude, this idea of Mauricio Macri and Cambiemos, Juntos por el Cambio, as the main opposition party, it doesn't seem like something to take for granted. I mean, given how badly this government has performed, given what has become of Argentina's radical party, which had been the main opposition party for a century, older than even Peronism, it seemed that there was a possibility that, Cambiemos either would have disintegrated in this election or have reverted back to being merely a party in the capital city of Buenos Aires. And instead, it seems to me to be a legitimate force.
Definitely. And I do think that the results of this election contributed to that, because had the government got, I don't know, maybe 30 or 32% of the vote, it would have seemed like it was a very big defeat and that Mauricio Macri was done, meaning that there would have been a bit of a power vacuum within Cambiemos, and maybe the radicals, the radicales, or other figures within Cambiemos would have tried to fill that vacuum, meaning that the possibilities of the coalition disintegrating would have been bigger. But now that they're going to be the first minority, as we call, I think helps consolidate the coalition for the next years to come. And it means that Argentina will have something that will resemble very much a bipartisan system for the first time in quite a while.
Demian Bio is a reporter covering Argentina's election for Infobae in Buenos Aires. Thank you so much for joining us.
Please, thank you.
And thankfully, our producer is a wonderful editor.
That's me, Katie Hopkins. If you enjoyed the show, subscribe to the Argentina Project podcast on SoundCloud and sign up for our weekly newsletter at wilsoncenter.org/weekly-asado.